is going to be a presentation and discussion about the Common Core state standards and the district's implementation of the new state standards. So I'm going to turn this over to Mr. Superintendent. Are you going to introduce this?
Thank you, Mr. President. I believe that this item is going to be taken care of by our Deputy Superintendent for Education Services, Maria Santos.
Okay.
Good evening, President Kakashiba and directors. We're very pleased to join you this evening to present on the Common Core State Standards and our implementation plan. Kyla Trammell, Associate Superintendent of Leadership, Curriculum, and Instruction, will be joining me in this presentation as well. I hope I can do something from back here. Can you do something? What are the Common Core State Standards? The Common Core State Standards are a nationally agreed upon set of expectations that students need to master to succeed in college and careers. And these particular standards were designed by a council of chief state school officers and the National Governors Association for Best Practices. They also received input and feedback from teachers, administrators, and academic experts in the areas of English language arts and mathematics. Today we're going to talk about why the standards are important, as well as talk a little bit about the instructional shifts in the standards, and then move right into implementation, and then talk a little bit about our next steps as we do the work here in the district, and then open up for discussion questions. When we think about the Common Core state standards in English language arts and mathematics, we're looking at a new set of standards. And why a new set of standards at this point in time? One of the key motivations for the set of standards was that students were not sufficiently prepared for college and careers, and that they were not being prepared to really be competitive in our global economy. About 40% of our entering college students are required to take remedial courses before they actually start earning courses towards credit towards graduation in our colleges. As technology has increased throughout the nation, routine skills and jobs in these have decreased. Therefore, many of the industries and positions require problem solving and communication skills, a key area of emphasis of these particular standards. Also, by 2018, 62% of the U.S. jobs are going to require education beyond high school. That is a significant demand for students who are currently in our school system. In addition, the United States ranks 15th among the 20 major industrialized countries in the number of adults between the ages of 25 and 35 that have completed a bachelor's degree. All of these key data points point to a need to create a more robust set of standards to prepare students for the types of careers and opportunities that will be available for them. What are those key shifts in these standards? What makes for a major significant challenge for all of us as we look at these new standards? When we look at the area of English language arts, we are moving away from curriculum that was predominantly dominated by the narrative to a balance between narrative, informational, and argumentative reading and writing. Traditionally, in fourth grade, we would have a curriculum that has significant focus on the narrative. These standards now require that 50% of the time in English language arts is devoted to the narrative and 50% to informational texts. By the time students are in 12th grade, we're looking at 70% of the time on informational texts and 30% of the time on the narrative. This is a huge shift in terms of the language arts program. We are, in addition to studying literary works, we are looking at complex texts and technical materials. This is a different demand on our system, on our teachers, as well as on our students. Another key instructional shift is really engaging our students in writing and with an emphasis on argumentation and using evidence to substantiate positions, claims, and also a part of the English language arts standards requires that we engage students in research in each of the areas. In addition, the standards speak to building the capacity for our students to communicate effectively and with a level of facility in academic areas. And so an increased focus on academic discussion. Alongside with that is a significant attention to complex texts. And certainly as we've been doing the work here in the district where we have been testing our students using the Scholastic Reading Inventory, looking at grade level proficiency, we know that we have significant work to do in terms of ratcheting up the literacy levels of all of our students. These new standards will come with new assessments, and our traditional assessments have been assessments that have a significant focus on what we call basic skills. And if you look at this particular item, we're asking students to choose, right, what they think might be a definition from reading text. And a student could very well just guess and get this right. As we move into our new assessment system, we're putting a very significant demand on students to perform, right? So here's a 7th grade task where now students have to imagine that they're in a debate club and actually create an argument and use text to create that argument, substantiate the claims using the text from the different text materials that they are provided. This is a very different type of task that will be requiring significant language demands as well as conceptual demands for students. In the area of mathematics, the practices, we are also looking at major shifts in terms of practices, students really engaging with complex problems and persevering to solve them, to reason abstractly, to really argue as well in mathematics. So students that traditionally did well in mathematics now are also charged to substantiate, to argue, to critique the reasoning of others, and to also do this with multiple representations, whether it's symbolic visual representations, so that they need to really master the concepts. And as we look at the work in the mathematics area, we're looking at some major shifts that we are engaging students in really productively struggle with concepts and to use their language to explain and to argue. And so what traditionally in a math classroom we might be spending time going over procedures and showing kids how to solve a problem, we're now asking teachers to have the kids struggle with the problem and then work through to that solution. A very different approach. The items also in mathematics are changing significantly. In most of our elementary math program, we usually have a correct response, a one-step problem. With the new assessments, students will be not only looking at problems that ask them to not only use their computational skills and their number sense, but also to justify and explain. And so this is a very significant shift, that it won't be just a matter of kids looking at numbers and kind of guessing. So this is key to the work. As we look at the new assessments, there will be multiple choice. We will continue to have multiple choice items, but they will be a little bit more complex and harder. Harder in the sense that they will have a significant language demand as well as conceptual demand for students. And also, students will be asked to construct responses. There will be items where they have to construct, and then there will be much more complex performance tasks that students will engage in. As we look at the work with the standards, one of the things that we have been working on is really looking at the points of intersection between the standards, whether it's English language arts, mathematics, and the recently adopted next generation science standards. Fortunately, we have been working in all three of these areas and building the capacity for our students and teachers to engage with these new standards.
I'm just going to talk for a few minutes just kind of about what we're doing actually this year to implement the standards and to keep you engaged. I've given you a lot of our resources and tools that we're using with various schools, so you can kind of peruse them as I'm speaking. So for the last 2 years, we've been engaged in a lot of partnership work with a lot of, I'll give you a test at the end, so make sure you're reading all the materials. We've been engaging with a lot of teachers, teacher leaders. About 50 teachers across the district have helped us develop some of our core curriculum materials in partnership with specialists from my office and different content experts, both locally as well as nationally, to kind of develop, I don't want to say curriculum because we're moving away from script, but more of a guide in terms of quality teaching and learning, and really getting back to what folks who've been in teaching No Child Left Behind, what people have always known to be good quality teaching and learning, and now having more of the space to do that and really teach interdisciplinary in an interdisciplinary fashion. So this is really the first year of actually doing and putting into action what as a system we've been learning about for the last 2 years. You can go on to the next slide. So from our learning, from a lot of the engagement, we've kind of landed for this year on 3 instructional shifts that really has a hyper focus on literacy and really focusing on what it means to be literate in the 21st century, which is being able to read, think, write, and speak critically across all disciplines and apply that knowledge to any real-world situation. So we're focusing on academic discussions. What we found last year through doing lots of classroom observation is most of our students don't have quality opportunities to speak. If you're not speaking, you're not synthesizing information and making sense. We're also focusing on reading complex text. If you can tap. Reading complex text. From looking at some of our scholastic reading inventory data, which is really an indicator of how well our students are reading in our system, we know that we need to, one, provide our students, which is something centrally we need to be responsible for, more rigorous text, kindergarten through 12th grade. Part of what we know with the standards is that the level of rigor that kids need to be reading needs to improve, which means we need to make sure that students have the text in their classroom, that they have multiple opportunities to engage in complex text, more nonfiction, expository text. And what I like to say is one of the unintentional consequences is No Child Left Behind is that the lack of opportunities of students to write, kindergarten through 12th grade, particularly in elementary, with our implementation of open court. And I say this as a teacher who taught up in court pre and post open court, and also as a principal, that many of our kids didn't have the opportunities to write because there weren't a lot of quality opportunities in some of the curriculum we've implemented. And we know that that is a non-negotiable skill that kids need, whether they're going to college, working, and go to school, so that we want to make sure that that's an emphasis in all of our content areas. So I want to highlight kind of 2 critical pieces of professional learning. We're thinking of professional learning, it's not so much district telling teachers and schools what to do, but providing them opportunities to reflect on what they're doing, what their next step is, and providing more opportunities to schools to learn from each other. So if one school's had success where another school hasn't, they can learn and build from there. I think one of the things that has been an emerging success is our teacher leader network, which was actually, that design was feedback from teachers. In some of our, in 2011, we were doing more of a central approach, bringing all teachers together. Teachers were saying that's not going to work, our schools are too different, it's too much to differentiate, we need more of a trainer of trainer models, give a couple of us the information, we can go back and we can customize it and make it work for our school. So we've been trying to, as we're doing this, listen to the feedback. It's not perfect, this is a process, but I do feel like the Teacher Leader Network gives teachers the opportunity to learn from other sites and engage in other sites because they do have the opportunity on a monthly basis to learn how's the implementation going in terms of the curriculum, the instruction, and the assessment. One of the pieces of resources that you have in front of you is a copy of the core curriculum guide, which again is just an example of a tool to support teachers in moving away from the script and in encouraging them and empowering them to create their own curriculum and just use sound practices in terms of lesson design. And the other document that you have is a copy of our site implementation guide, where the audience for that is more for the principals, but it's more of the approach of distributed leadership, where we're trying to move more towards the school being empowered to monitor teaching and learning, and not just the principal on their own, and us supporting both the principal and the teacher leaders in terms of having a better collaborative working relationship and environment to monitor the learning for students and also the professional learning needed for both the principal and the teacher. And so these next 3 slides, you can pass through them pretty quickly, just walk you through what's in the implementation guide, where it kind of outlines the role of each person in the school. Yes, you get an A so far. Here, paying attention. You can keep going. One more, please. So one of the ways that we're trying to monitor all of this is if we're not seeing different results for kids, right? So we're trying to be mindful. This is a big piece of the work this year, is trying to do a better job of getting feedback from our sites in terms of where they need more support, where they need the resources, and what we're learning. So the piece about the rounds that I think is unique is, one, we're going to be in all schools across the system, K-12, that district representatives that are going to be facilitating these rounds are not just from the curriculum side, but also our family community partnership side. So there have been over 40 facilitators who've been trained. So we can start to look at the cross-section between culture, climate, and instruction, because that's a huge part of our strategic plan. So really trying to look specifically what is getting in the way of learning, particularly for our Black students, our Latino students, our students with disabilities, and getting multiple people who service schools in the classrooms, debriefing what they're seeing, so that it's learning not just for the school site, but learning for the district in terms of how we need to redistribute resources and better support schools. And so this is just a picture of some of our kids. This is Markham. This is one of our instructional shifts, getting kids to talk, so it's just showing them actually engaging in one of the strategies. And this is just a tool that many of the schools have been using as a way to gather evidence of the kind of talk going on in the classroom. Thank you, Gary.
Again, it's Markham, and we use this particular tool for English, language arts, math, and science.
I gave these to you already, right?
And so these are a group of schools here. The schools in green are schools that have been labeled focal schools from the core waiver, and also by you as the board, schools that we want to pay particular attention to. But these are schools that have actually been early implementers of the Common Core. They have either tried out new curriculum, they've helped to design curriculum units, and so we've been getting information and kind of feedback from them to design what our instructional shifts are this year, and getting a gauge of, well, what is it that our schools need. And so almost in partnership of them being willing to try out a lot of our new practices. If you can go to the next slide. In my department, these schools have been getting weekly support in a variety of ways, and it's differentiated depending on where the school is and what it is that they need. So it's coaching. Many of the principal supervisors are now doing walkthroughs with curriculum specialists as a way to build all of our capacity around what we should be looking for, not in an accountability way, but in a way to lift up what we all need to be doing to support the teaching and learning environment. And so one of the big things that I want to stress is, I always like to say teaching is an organizational responsibility, not just the responsibility of the individual classroom teacher. And so one of the huge pieces, and I'll just kind of focus on elementary, although this is a true statement, K through 12, or I should say pre-K through 12, is we need different curricula. And so as we know in elementary, Open Court has been our core curriculum, and we're trying to adopt more of a balanced literacy approach. So one of the things that I would like to do for next year is have a new adoption and really invest in more classroom libraries. Many of our schools have libraries that are outdated. What the kids are reading don't reflect who they are, their experience. And we also want to actually get more libraries that are multilingual, so that we're really pushing biliteracy, bilingualism, so that kids can read in both English and in their home language. The other piece that we know we need if we're talking about 21st century is devices. If everyone is supposed to be administering the SBAC assessment, and if we want to move more towards a blended learning environment, we have many of our middle schools and elementary schools that are piloting blended learning. We want to make sure that all of our schools by the end of this year actually have some devices, some laptops, so that they can do more innovative approaches in the classroom. And the other piece, and there's an example in your packet, is ramping up our communication with parents about the changes in terms of what's expected of their students. So all of the parent guides are actually posted on our public website. You can go there and look there. They're in Spanish. We're working them to get them in our other languages as well. And so my department's going to be working with the Family Community Schools Partnership Office so that we can be doing presentations at upcoming African American parent conferences, Latino parent conferences, and working with more of our organizations, community-based organizations, so that our parents know how they can better support their students. So I'm happy to take any questions that you have.